Okay, so this chapter talks about, the kind of research you need to do before you start a real estate investment. So a couple keywords you should know. First of all, you need to know that for real estate, location is the most important factor. That also means for every different project, you really need to know the locals. So that means whatever research you did for Chicago project may not be carried over to a project in Clemson. So know your locals. However, in addition to your location, you need to keep some factors in mind. You need to know the project type. Is it a single family house or is it an apartment? What's the floor plan? What's the size? What's the financing availability? Well, because each of those factors would determine who your customers are and whether they're able to pay for it. Okay, so we talked about this in chapter 1. This is very important, market segmentation. We talked about real estate, it's different. So if you're talking about the space market, the user market, people have different preferences or needs. Depends on which subgroup you're trying to offer the product to. So that means for every project, you need to know your product first. What kind of property are you trying to build? And what's the location? Based on all those factors, you can start your market research. Okay, what does it mean? It says like most real estate data is irrelevant in studying any particular market segment. This is actually saying, the overall framework, the principle, but every time you get to a new market segment, you really need to know the people, know your customer. And second, the most important data for a particular market segment may not be readily available. That means you would need to do market research for that. Okay, so this slide is kind of important sketch of how do you start or finish your market research. The first, after you kind of have some basic idea in your mind. First, you should define a market defining story. Try to start the research as if you're telling a story. And then you have to really think about your story. Is it making sense? Does it sounds like a successful case? So first, you need to know your product. What is the product you're offering? Apartment, townhouse, planned neighborhood, or retirement home? Second, after you know the product, who are you trying to sell or rent your product to? And then you need to know, are your customers there? Are they already there, or you have to do some advertisement or do some changes to the infrastructure to bring them there? And then once you know the customers and where they are, what do your customers care about? Do they care about a nice floor plan, privacy, the look of the interior decoration, or the commute to work or to school? Even if you have the best product, you really need to know the competition. You might be offering everything the local customers want at a very good price. However, if the competition is very bad, that means a lot of real estate developers are trying to offer the same product to the same customer base. It's possible that you will not be able to be very successful because the market is already saturated. Once you know all that, you collect data to answer every single question. Then you evaluate your results, basically saying, does it make sense? Is it more likely to generate a positive NPV for a product? Well, is there any additional information you have to collect? Well, if you have to collect more information, then you have to redefine the research. expand your scope until you reach the point that you answer every single question, you have every single data, and then you can end it here. So the entire chapter is trying to give you a couple examples to illustrate the research process. Okay, so this chapter has 3 case studies. I'll recommend you to go over each case carefully. This slide is talking about the story approach we just illustrated and the conventional approach. And the textbook talks about the pros, the benefits of the storytelling approach and why the conventional approach may not be sufficient. So those kind of questions may appear, on the midterm as multiple choices. What are some pros of the storytelling approach that a conventional approach cannot tell? 3 cases. Elysian Forest is planned unit development. The Palm Grove is a proposed office building. And the Plain Vista is apartment expansion. So for today, we're only going to focus on 1 case, but you can use the examples and the approach I give today to apply to other cases. Okay, so the Elysian Forest is a planned unit development. So for those of you who are there, let's try to get some interactions. Who remember, if you read the chapter, like what kind of product, like what is a planned unit development? Anybody? Zach, Susie, or Sean? You recall? What kind of product is this? Or do we have a similar product in Clemson?
Zach? It has like mixed densities, like there's a bunch of different like townhouses and different stuff, and also like recreation built in. It's kind of like a community, not just homes.
Exactly. So for the planned unit development, they are building a community, like a small city in that community with all the necessary facilities, with all different property types. And it has all the recreation facilities, or not all, but enough amount that the local people or the people in that PUD can share and enjoy. I think the next question is, I assume that you've been in Clemson for at least 3 years. I know with the pandemics, traveling and hanging out might be a little bit challenging, but do we have a community that's very similar to Elysian Forest in Clemson? Zach, do you remember one? Do we have a development in Clemson that's very similar to what we talked about? So let me ask you, have you been to Patrick Squares? Have you been there? Who has been there? That's where Rick Irvine is. Right? So I'm assuming, okay, so you're really quiet. Have you been to Patrick Square ever? Once?
I have not.
No? Okay. It's really close to Publix, and that's where Rick Irvine, the restaurant is. So in that community, you have apartments, you have single family houses, and you have restaurants, you have a hotel, you also have breakfast places, pizza. So the goal of Patrick Square is to offer a nice neighborhood for the retirees. Some of the retirees are actually from Lake Kiwi, right? So with Lake Kiwi, the landlots, you've been to Lake Kiwi, right? Yes? No?
I've been up there, yes.
Yes. So with Lake Kiwi, the average lot is large. So typically people in their late 50s or early 60s, after they retire, they buy a really nice big lake property. They enjoy gardening, they maintain it for like 10, 20 years. Once they reach their late 70s, early 80s, they cannot physically handle that maintenance. what they do is they sell their lake property, buy a small house in Patrick Square, and they don't travel much. In Patrick Square, there's a hospital. There are actually a couple hospitals, and I think there's also a daycare and restaurants and banks. A lot of older people or single parents or working professionals like that community. So back to the case discussion, Elysian Forest is a similar kind of product. Okay, so the location is in University City. It's bold and big, and the setup is similar to Clemson. So Elysian Forest is the first planned unit development in University City. It has 900 units. Okay, so the typical development for that town, based on the book, is smaller than 900 units. So this is a very ambitious and big development. Okay, those are the projected sales in Elysian Forest. So what that means is the developers say, I will develop 900 units in total, but I'll do that in phases. The first year, I will finish 88 and try to sell them all. And then I will use the cash I recover to complete 212 units in the second year, 236, 260, and 104 over the course of 5 years. You see that the number of development they're trying to do is kind of a projected curve, right? It starts smaller, it goes up, 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 and then in the last phase, they say, hey, maybe it's very popular, but we only have the capacity to do 104. Let's only do 104 in the last year. So our goal is based on their estimated completion, estimated sale. We'll have to do a research about the local population, about the financing capability of the local residents to see whether they're able to succeed in this setting. So the table below, this is from the textbook, is talking about the estimated sales in the University City, the whole housing market. Okay. The first year through 5 years, all sales is pretty stable. They're assuming 1,500 sales in the first 3 years, and then maybe a little bit increase over the next 2 years. The new units in total has been increasing drastically, from 500 to 1,100 after 5 years. This is saying the city is actually having more development, but the demand, the estimated demand, it's pretty much the same. That's not a very good signal. Let's see what happens next. So Elysian Forest offers a home pair. So it's essentially kind of townhome, right? You do not have your single lot or your entire land devoted to yourself. Instead, there are 2 units. So this is unit A, unit B, you share the driveway, and you also share the garage wall in common. So typically, the normal homes for the locals are single family homes. So this says, the local people kind of currently, they're more used to single family houses other than shared property boundaries. This is a typical Elysian Forest patio home cluster, right? This is every single lot. It's 1 lot, 2 lot, but every lot you're seeing 2 homes. That means they do not have their individual backyard and less privacy. But maybe people like that, who knows? Let's see. Okay, let's follow the flow chart and try to determine the product. So Elysian Forest is an upper income, high density ownership residences. What does that mean? Upper income, means they want to sell it to rich people. High density means shared community boundaries, right? It's not, there's no privacy. I mean, there's some privacy, but not as private as the single family homes as their competitors. Ownership residences, what does that mean? Zach, what does ownership residency mean?
They don't want to rent. They want people to buy the homes.
They're trying to sell. Like people who are their customers are exclusively in the ownership market. They're looking for the space and they're looking to buy instead of renting. So based on that, they find out they want to sell, it's probably like the top 30% of the households in, you know, in the local, in the city can afford it, luxury group. But not the top 8%, because maybe the top 8% want something better. And they want to sell it to not traditional family with children at home. Why is that? Sean, are you there? So why are they targeting non-traditional family? Like what does it mean when they say non-traditional family? Take a guess. Okay, we'll give Sean a couple minutes. Zachary, what do you think? What does it mean when they say they don't want to sell it to traditional family?
Maybe they have some special circumstances.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So what they're targeting is mainly whenever they're referring to traditional family, they're talking about two parents and children. Why is that? So whenever people have children, they prefer bigger yards, more privacy for their children to play at. So, and they have more labor to maintain the yard. So Elysian Forest people are thinking, hey, why don't we sell it to single parents or working professional or people don't have children, so they don't need a backyard or school district? And also single parents, you know, they have children, but they probably don't have the energy to maintain the yard. Let's try to sell them to those. Whenever they determine that, they're really significantly shrinking their customer base. Okay, thank you, Zach and Sean. So next they ask, where are the customers? They say, well, the local non-traditional family, they have the retirees, they have empty nesters, you know, the people whose children are in college already. They have single parents, they have other adults, working professionals. So what do customers care? Well, they want good access to work, good commute, you know, nice restaurants and local pubs, local bars that, you know, walking distance, and the social facilities, tennis courts, and you know, they have really nice design. Okay. They want to know the competition. They find out there's not other comparable projects, and there's parade homes that, you know, offer similar product like high end, but with individual backyards. So they collect some data. They find out that among all households in University City, we have a little bit less than 50%, they're in the rental households. Maybe they're students, maybe they're not ready to settle down. And also there are a little bit more than 50% owner occupied households. So those are all the potential buyers. And based on the pricing strategy, Elysian Forest target the top 30, but not the top 8. So it's really from the 30th percentile to the 92nd percentile, right? And then they're excluding the traditional families. So among this group, they have to really subtract the traditional families who can afford that price range. So here is the core market segments. This core market segments estimates if they can sell everything to, if they can sell to everyone, that's the maximum number of people who will buy their homes. Okay, they collected some data, etc. So here are the numbers entered. So there's like 10,000 potential households. Among that, 3,400, 3,500 are in the traditional family group, and their core market is subtract the traditional family. There are only 6,642 families who can buy it. So very importantly, write it down. If I ask you to calculate the market share of this project, this is a total maximum potential people who can buy their homes divided by the overall households owner occupied in University City. So we have 13.8%. Okay, so here are the numbers. So here are the targeted sales by year for Elysian Forest. And this is the market potential. So we have to calculate the projected total market sale every year by the percent of customer base that Elysian Forest developers can potentially capture. So, and they projected that, not every of their potential customers will buy or buy from them, right? This number, 13.81% are the people who can afford or who may consider, but they might be attracted by other development as well. So they're assuming that every 5 people they talk to or they want to buy a home, maybe so the total capture rate is 20%. So the estimated sale every year is 41, 41, 43, 44, 47. What does that tell us? Susie, are you there? Susie? Okay, so Sean, are you there? So compared to, I have a question for you. This shows the number of homes ready for sale offered by Elysian Forest. And they can only be successful if they're able to sell everything or the majority of the housing units they produce. This shows the projected sale they can realistically make. What does that tell us? They compare this number every year to this number. So based on the comparison, do you think Elysian Forest would be able to sell the majority of the houses they build every year? Sean? We can't hear you, so maybe there's something wrong with your microphone. Zach, what do you think about the potential sales they can make based on this analysis?
It's not as many as they wanted to make.
Exactly, right? They will make, more than 200, but realistically, they will only be able to sell about 40 some units every year. So overall, they built 80, they built 20, but they were not able to sell. And the project went foreclosure because even in the first year, they were not able to sell all their projected homes, and they do not have sufficient cash to build the follow-up projects. So therefore, this is not a very successful business case. So what I may ask you on the midterm is, what went wrong? And what kind of changes they can make to the project to make it more successful? So some analysis I may ask you to calculate based on this chapter is, I may give you the total population, I may give you the percentage of the local people in each category. And I may ask you to calculate the core market share for a specific project based on the number I give you. Any question? Any question based on the case? Okay. If not, I think we can skip the next two questions and also the remaining of the chapter for the sake of time. So you're still responsible to know the materials, but you know, I think you can apply the discussion we just did for Elysian Forest to analyze the other two cases. Let's start the next chapter. I want to be able to spend more time on the appraisals.